Hello and welcome to the chapter guide to chapter 10, Whistle, and I'll come to you of The Woman in Black. This is a chapter where the title is obliquely related to an event in the story. There is a whistle and a dog runs off, but it is more directly a literary allusion. It's a reference to M.R. James's ghost story, Oh Whistle, and I'll come to you, my lad. This is a relatively typical technique of Hill, demonstrating that she's working directly in this tradition of the Gothic and of the ghost story. And here she's referencing one of her favorite ghost story writing models. This is she's borrowing directly from the literary tradition that M.R. James was working in. So this is a chapter which is a bit different. The pace, the tone do change quite dramatically. Here things occur. Instead of the threatening of the things, it's the actual things occurring that become the generators of tension and suspense. So we start off with Arthur waking up in a storm. We have the pathetic fallacy, a big red flag coming from this. This storm represents anger, and it represents the woman in black's anger. The storm knocks out the electricity and plunges Arthur into darkness. And prior to this point, he wasn't unsettled by this, but the moment that his sight is taken away, again, Arthur is left terrified, because at the same time, we've also started to hear the noises of the haunting coming up, and he realizes that whilst he initially thought he could face out these noises, that they were just hauntings, the feeling surrounding the whole thing, the terror is just too much for him. And unfortunately, he reaches for his torch, but drops it because it's dark and he can't find it. And it smashes on the floor. And he's left there in this. And there's a really extensive description of how Arthur feels at this point, as there frequently is. But he hits upon a great plan, because he knows there is a light somewhere in the house. There's a candle in the nursery. Good plan, Arthur, because we know that that's the focus of the haunting. So that's definitely the place we should be going right now. However, he actually gets there. It's relatively uneventful, aside from the terror that he's experiencing along the way. But when he walks into the nursery, when he goes in there, he feels feelings that are not his. He feels overwhelmed by grief and loss. And as he says, this is an experience that he has never had, and the feelings that definitely don't belong to him. They don't. They belong to the woman in black, as we later find out why. And these feelings just drop when he leaves the room. He manages to get back to his room, lights the candle, tries to do some reading, eventually dozes off and wakes up in the morning at a point in time. He can't tell why, because he can't tell when, because whilst there is a greyish light, there's heavy cloud cover, and it looks like the rain is could come down at any minute, and the weather is still lowering and unpleasant, even though the storm has subsided. So Arthur then gets up, goes out to take the dog for a walk, and then there is a whistling noise from out across the marshes, and the dog runs after it. So here we see the direct reference to the title. And the dog gets caught in the quicksand and starts getting pulled under. That isn't how quicksand works, but hey, why not? Why let the laws of physics get in the way of a good story? The idea of being scientifically accurate is not what we're about here. This is a ghost story. So Arthur then runs off to rescue the dog, and there's a really tense, dramatic struggle. This is the time when we actually see physical peril introduced. Both Arthur and the dog could die. They could drown out there on the marshes. But he rescues the dog, and after a very long, tense battle with some really lengthy descriptions that are definitely worth going back to and having a look at and seeing how the author structures those, we'll look at some of those in a moment, he turns back, carries the dog back to Eelmarsh House, sees in the window of the nursery the face of the woman in black staring down at him, looking directly at him. And as he reaches the door, he begins to hear the sound of the pony and trap again, and Arthur bravely faints as his defensive mechanism. So that obviously It's a good thing to do in a time of crisis. But he has, he's literally overcome. He's had too much. He's put himself in a situation that he couldn't handle, and it becomes too much for him, and boom, he faints dead away. So let's have a look at some of the things to note. The overall narrative structure. This is the absolute height of the tension in this part of the novel. It is not the height of the tension of the novel. It feels like it is. It feels like it should be. And that's where we're led to. And this crescendoing peak reaches here. And we're at the very top of one of these sawtooth points. And the pathetic fallacy, again, it's not just reflecting Arthur's mood, but it seems to be reflecting the woman in black's mood as well. And I think that's quite an interesting point, that it's here just not to reflect just Arthur, and it's not as a plot device to trap Arthur, but it's reflecting other things. Sound imagery too. Obviously here we've got sound imagery working to a lesser extent than the previous chapter, but the noises are there, and they are there to create a kind of an atmosphere. And then we've also got the sentence and paragraph structure. Here we have Hill doing action, and she's doing it really effectively, using those techniques of those long galloping sentences full of verb phrases when this and that is happening, into a short, powerful finishing phrase, which really focuses your attention on that moment. And again, we also get those lengthy descriptions of Arthur's feelings. Again, we control the pace, the pacing, so one of the things just to be aware of is that saying a long sentence slows things down and a short sentence makes things quicker is not true. It depends what is in the sentence. It depends how that sentence is structured. It depends what precedes and follows the sentence. You have to look at the overall effect of the pace at that moment in time. There's no blanket answer for do long sentences make things slow, do short sentences make things fast. No, they don't. It really depends what those sentences are being used for and how they're being used. So let's just have a quick look at this one here. We've got the classic, it was a dark and stormy night, and this signals a kind of a clear shift in tone. Incidentally, the it was a dark and stormy night is a line from a Victorian novel. It's become a kind of trope for a hackneyed, cliched opening, but it was genuinely an opening to a novel that is often used as an example of one of the worst pieces of writing in the world. But it's interesting that dark and stormy night has kind of forever been associated with the tales of ghosts and terrible things. But whatever it is this storm is doing exactly what storms are meant to do, which is meant to represent bad things. They represent a negative atmosphere, and this one definitely does. I mean, look at some of the words that are used: moaning and roaring. Again, we see Arthur having his sight occluded. That's really, really important. And went out onto the landing, thought that someone walked past him. That's a really important quote to have a look at. He genuinely almost gets a tactile sense of the woman in black's presence. And then all the lights go out. So again, he is having his sight occluded, this time by darkness rather than the mist. Again, these two quotations show the strange effects of the haunting on Arthur. He can't recognize, he doesn't know what the feelings are. Not horror, but grief, sadness, loss and bereavement. Distress mingled with utter despair. Again, notice this and this, this and this with this. So you have those pairs of description, and in a group of three, which you see scattered throughout the novel. So just keep an eye out for that sort of stuff. And again, we get Arthur commenting. Again, this use of the first-person narrative gives us the access to the interior monologue of Arthur. And here we see him reflecting that, these really weren't my emotions, and the way they arrive and the way they leave is not normal. And there, I heard unmistakably clean and clear the sound of someone whistling as one whistles to summon a dog. Yep, as I said before, this is a reference to that title of the chapter, but it's a reference to that. And it's clearly the trap for Arthur to draw the dog away, and he will be forced to either watch it drown or go and help it and possibly drown himself. And this is, like I said, I think this is the very absolute pinnacle of the tension. The woman in black is seen. She appears physically only 4 times, and this is the third time. Leave you to work out when the last time she's going to appear will be. And again, we have those short sentences, 2 noun phrases, and then that verb phrase. She was looking directly towards me. So if you look at these structures, so we have this long sentence, dun, 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 and then we've got these short ones packing in afterwards. Might say, oh, short sentences speed things up. A woman, that woman. She was looking directly toward me. In fact, actually, if anything, this slows the pace down. And some of the longer sentences have that kind of tumbling, frenetic action that we see when Arthur's out there trying to rescue the dog.